Hi guys, Attila here from Cylanda. Wanted to give you a quick recording of a presentation that I gave recently for the American Council of Engineering Companies of Hawaii. It's a pretty informative presentation on NIST, SPRS, and CMMC, and I know there was a lot of information, and perhaps some people who attended would like a copy of it, just to kind of be able to refresh and review and repeat some of this information maybe to other members of their team. So I wanted to give you this quick recording. It's a little bit faster than what I gave, obviously in the presentation, but I'm trying to condense it because I know you can always hit pause and play while you listen to it or watch it. So anyways, let's get started. So my name is Attila SPRS. I'm with Cylanda, and what we're going to be talking today about is NIST, SPRS, and CMMC. A little bit of a disclaimer, there is no sales pitch in this presentation. I apologize, I'm not going to be trying to sell you on anything. Everything that I'm going to be offering you at the end of the presentation really is free. We're here to try to help the community, and the way to do it is by giving and giving. As we all know, these kind of things tend to come back to you, so I'm not really too worried about that, but we do want to help with the community. So pay attention to those resources at the end. I'm also going to be giving you a website where you can log in, download all the presentation materials that I'm going to be displaying during this video, and you can go there and review them as much as you like at your own leisure. So anyways, all free stuff. That's my disclaimer. You're probably wondering, why the heck am I in cybersecurity? Why did I start this company all these years ago? And I can tell you right now, it's definitely for these two guys, the ones that are circled in red on your screen. Well, I originally started the company as an outlet to helping and help protect people in the community. And once you have those kids, they sure help you focus. And I hyper-focused and built the entire organization to hyper-focus on security. Now, my vision is to give them a place where my kids can, once they graduate, go out and enter the workforce and have a living wage. I want to grow those local jobs. And the great part about cybersecurity is it's a great mechanism, it's a great vehicle, it's a great tool to expand the company internationally, with Hawaii as being the home base for these local jobs. So we can grow these local jobs. That's what I'm trying to do here. So I believe that it's possible, and I really hope that you believe the same thing and can jump on board with our mission. So I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity in the news because, yes, it seems to end up there every few weeks. Just recently, the Colonial Pipeline, the key U.S. pipeline for the East Coast, was shut down due to a cyber attack. And cyber attack, it deployed ransomware over what would otherwise be a relatively uneventful weekend. Now, ransomware is pretty nasty stuff. The way it works is that the cyber criminal infiltrates the network, gets footholds inside, and then deploys a set of mechanisms that essentially encrypts all the computers and devices that it can possibly access, and then shuts everything down. Essentially turns all the computers into bricks, doorstops, cannot operate, and they demand a ransom. That is paid to be paid in untraceable Bitcoin or some other form of cryptocurrency, and in exchange they'll quote unquote release, or I'll give you the keys to unencrypt that data. Well, let's see how well that turned out. Now, the key thing about Colonial Pipeline, and this is why it's so important that we bring this up, is because it is the largest energy infrastructure cyber attack on U.S. soil. It was performed by Russian non-state actors, otherwise known as criminal gangs, private individuals. And these guys were called DarkSide. Now, DarkSide may sound familiar to you because it's a name that is derived from Star Wars. Maybe your kids are really into Star Wars, or maybe you are, who knows. But DarkSide, it was the name of the non-state actors who performed this bad activity. Now, they gained access to the Colonial Pipeline network from credentials that were leaked on the dark web. And we're going to talk about that later because it's pretty important. But, what was a result of all this is that fuel prices went up. They rose. Widespread fuel shortages. They had fuel hoarding. Gas stations were out of gas. People were stocking up. And, because they're a private company, there was a limited release of information. But there was an FBI flash that I'm going to make sure that is available for download at the end of the presentation. I'm going to bring it up for you here on your screen. And the reason that this is important is that it helps you as an individual go into your network and be able to identify indicators of compromise. Now this is something called TLP green. TLP is traffic light protocol. Traffic light protocol green means it's need to know. Those in your industry, critical infrastructure, can have access to this. This is not TLP white. TLP white means it's accessible for everyone. So TLP green, circulated amongst your peers as needed, but not for everyone, right? Technical details are here. I encourage you or your IT department to look through this. It'll show you how to figure out if there's any indicators of compromise, any sort of things to look for, right? Check this out, especially if you're a technical person. Now, the Justice Department said that, they said last month, so this was March, right? So that 2020 was the worst year to date for ransomware attacks, and they're only becoming more frequent. So on average, ransomware demands exceeded $100,000 last year, and in some cases were up to tens of millions of dollars. Don't believe me? Google the Apple ransomware payout amount. It's about 20 million bucks. Pretty steep, right? Now, more than $350 million were reported, right? Reported is a big word because that means that most of it is not reported. So $350 million was reported as paid as a result of ransomware in the past year, and compared to 2019, that $350 million is up over 300%. Not good news for your industry. And you may think, this is probably an isolated incident. How could this happen more than once? Well, guess what? It did, right? So on February 5th, Florida's Oldsmar water treatment plant, a hacker remotely increased the sodium hydroxide levels, that's the levels of lye, in the city's water from 100 parts per million to 11,100 parts per million, right? So 100 to 11,100. That's a lot. Now, luckily, a worker happened to be watching the gauges at the time. Good thing he wasn't out to lunch, right? He saw these levels rise, and he shut everything down right away. Now, this, unfortunately, would have caused physical harm to the public, of that small town of Oldsmar, such as having the water turn acidic and dangerous, right? Undrinkable. Now, details of this attack and how to mitigate it are on a TLP white briefing. Now, this is a joint briefing, but from the CISA and FBI, and this is pretty cool stuff. Here we go. This is the joint briefing here, right? The compromise of U.S. water treatment facility, and the reason that this one is important is because it tells you how they got in and what you can do about it. Now, what you want to listen to if you're a technical person, right, is that if you're using Windows 7, get rid of it, right? This was an end-of-life product. This is how they got inside the water treatment plant. Second thing you want to listen to is TeamViewer and how it's configured on your network. If you use TeamViewer, it's a pretty common piece of software. This TLP White Joint CISA advisory tells you how to configure TeamViewer so that it doesn't become compromised. So listen to those two things, or if you're not in your IT department, forward this advisory over. It is TLP White, so you can circulate it to whoever you like, and see if you can secure your network from something like this happening to you. Because what I'm trying to tell you here is that this is not some sort of far-off problem. These are things that are becoming more regular, and you want to be as proactive as possible in your organization. Now, let's talk a little bit about us. I know I'm moving fast here, so I'll kind of briefly go over what this means. So we are a MSSP. This is a Managed Security Services Provider. Now, a Managed Security Services Provider, which means that we do the outsourced bit of the security and infrastructure management and some of those really kind of specialized skills that maybe the IT department may not get around to doing. So we typically work together with IT departments, and this all falls kind of under the professional services, intangible goods, kind of knowledge work umbrella, and that's why we believe that that's a wonderful opportunity for local job growth. Is that knowledge work is the way to do it. Kinetic work sometimes can be a little bit difficult, right? So we want to grow those local jobs. We want to help companies around the globe solve their security challenges, make the world a safer place. I believe we can do it. A little bit more. We started in 2007, and we wanted to help grow local jobs. That's really where it came from. Now we look for clients who are like us. They want to improve their business with technology. They have compliance requirements that they need met, and they need a little bit of help to do this. We typically work with business owners, IT departments, but really a lot with IT departments. We like working with them. We all speak the same kind of language, and a lot of community organizations. We do a lot of community outreach. You'll see us on the news. I've been on KHNL, KHON, KITV, PBS. I don't know, lots of places. You may even see me in the Advertiser. Was in the Advertiser, in fact, just the day that we're recording this. So I'm in there as well. And the idea is trying to get out there, spread the word that the world can become a safer place if we just pay a little attention to cybersecurity. So as an MSSP, I believe, and our entire team believes, that each of us, right, is connected to the most insecure network on Earth. You're probably connected to it right now, listening to me talk, right? So, and that network is, of course, the internet. So what we do is so important because it protects businesses like yours from theft, crime, and disaster. Now, we get phone calls pretty often, actually. And guess what they ask for, right? I'll tell you here. So first thing we usually get a lot of is pressure. And that pressure comes from outside sources. That could be your clients are asking you for compliance needs. They need to meet their certain compliance requirements. They need you to help them do it. That could be from contracts. It could be from all kinds of sources, maybe just from management, but it's from an outside source. If there's mergers and acquisitions, activity in progress, well, that sometimes comes into play, right? So M&A activity. So there's some sort of outside force that's giving us that pressure, right? The other thing we see is we get calls from IT departments. Well, they're busy. They're just overwhelmed with the operational challenges of running a successful organization. They just need that outside expertise. We work together with them, make them look good, make everyone secure. Some other folks, they need help with managing their infrastructure, securing it, streamlining it, making it a little bit better. There's some IT projects, big moves, new locations, staff augmentation, new offices, etc., right? And they need help with putting all that together. We can come in and help them out. And the last thing, which is the unfortunate one, is we unfortunately do have to work with law enforcement, FBI, and Homeland Security in order to recover from a security incident. That often includes working with the IT department, with insurance, with attorneys. There's a lot that goes into that, but it is an unfortunate side effect of our business, and we don't like seeing it happen to anyone, but it can happen to you, so just beware. We do see it. Three major pillars of service that we do deliver on is cybersecurity, and that includes all these services that protect companies, right? So these are live, real-time monitoring and protection services, patching, updating, security, EDR, UTMs. We do preventative security and incident remediation. So that's the Homeland Security, FBI stuff that I was mentioning earlier. Second thing is compliance, right? So we're familiar with all the NIST, CMMC, SOC 2 GDPR, ISO 27001. These kind of requirements are typically from outside sources, right? So federal, state requirements, etc. And then we also work alongside IT departments, or just do the IT management for you, where we bring this security expertise to your company to make it more safe to operate and do all those kind of maintenance tasks that no one in the IT department really wants to do, right? So let's be honest here. Good place to start in illustrating kind of the circumstances and the situations we found ourselves in is to talk about a recent project, a recent case study. And drink some kombucha here. So here's what happened. We get a call. And when do you think these calls come in? On a Monday morning? No. They come in on a Friday afternoon. Every time. It's about 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Phone call comes in. They say, hey, we need to talk to Attila. Sure, I'll take the call. And it's some good folks at an IT department for a critical infrastructure company that's in the chemical sector. They say, you know what, Attila, unfortunately, we just got a visit from an FBI agent. He showed us his gun and his badge. It was real. And he gave us all this documentation showing that our network was actively being monitored by bad actors on the dark web. And they were actually selling access to our network. And that's why Homeland Security got involved, because we are critical infrastructure, right? Not good stuff. What should we do? Well, we had to jump in there and do a remediation project. And we had to put safeguards into place to remove these footholds of this organization, that these bad actors had in this organization. Otherwise, they would have continued to have complete access to that network. Now, luckily there was no CUI in place, and we'll discuss what CUI is in a moment here, but once they did establish these footholds and they saw us kind of probing around and start to remove their footholds, whoa, they deployed ransomware and shut down the entire operations. It was really tough. Now, there were several hundred employees that couldn't work. It took an enormous amount of effort to get things back up and running. We had to deal with insurance and attorneys and law enforcement and all kinds of stuff. But at the end, we were able to get everything up and running. No one was hurt. No data was lost. And this was a great story that illustrates that if you do have an IT department that's has some good competent skills, and that they're there and they have the right tools and passion, we can work together with them to bring the organization back online without too much disruption, and everyone can get back to work and move on with their lives. So now we're going to talk now a little bit more about a few things, and we're going to really start to dive into NIST CMMC. But first, we're going to talk about CUI so that you understand what it is. We're going to talk about NIST SP 800-171. We're going to talk about your roadmap to compliance. Remember, I made that promise to you a little bit earlier, and I'm going to show you a roadmap to compliance that's going to work for any sort of compliance standard that comes across your desk. We're going to talk about CMMC, where it comes from, where it's going, why it exists, SPRS, that lovely thing in between, NIST SP 800-171 and CMMC, and how you can calculate it for yourself. And we're going to talk about common requirements. No matter what kind of security challenges you come across, there are some commonalities, and you can start addressing those today. And of course, free resources. Made those promised to you a little bit earlier. And there was a Q&A session at the beginning of this call. We're going to talk about that. I'm sorry, there was a Q&A question that came in during the live presentation. I'll bring that Q&A session back so that we can talk a little bit about what they asked and how to solve it for yourself, because I'm sure it's a common question and common answer. So let's talk about CUI. CUI stands for Controlled Unclassified Information. Now, this is important stuff. This is data that's, it could be print, right? So, but 80% of the time it's digital. And these are data documents that include blueprints, plans, whatever, that are marked confidential or private, and they can include technical plans, intelligence, financial data, law enforcement data, all kinds of stuff. But the key is DoD understands that this is a valuable target for criminals, right? In fact, you don't have to take my word for it. Let's take a look at what the CMMC cybersecurity certification document says about it, right? So this is version 1.02, released March of 2020, right? We're going to jump over here to page 5. You can download this for yourself. It's going to come from the resources at the end of this presentation. It says here that the theft of intellectual property and sensitive information from all industrial sectors due to malicious cyber activity threatens economic security and national security, right? They estimate that the malicious cyber activity costs the U.S. economy between $57 billion and $109 billion in 2016. Wow, that was a long time ago, pre-pandemic. And they're saying that cybercrime was as high as $600 billion in 2017. And why this is a problem and why it relates to you is because malicious cyber actors have targeted and continue to target the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base sector, and the supply chain of the DoD. Right? The DIB sector consists of over 300,000 companies that support the warfighter and contribute towards the research, engineering, development, acquisition, production, delivery, sustainment, and operations of DoD systems, networks, installation, capabilities, and services. Okay, you can read this any way you like. What they're worried about is 300,000 plus of their supply chain are vulnerable because they have access to CUI, and they want to do something about it. I don't blame them, right? So, what do you think they did? Well, what do you think they're so worried about? CUI, where do you think it goes? It goes to the dark web. Now, if you've seen Wreck-It Ralph 2, that's great. There's a scene in there where Wreck-It Ralph goes into the dark web, and it's a dark back alley, and it seems kind of scary, and there's some kind of shady characters walking around there. Truth is, it's a lot worse than that. So let me show you what the internet looks like from an analogy of an iceberg. And my son, he loves the Titanic, so he loves every time I show a picture of the iceberg. So let's talk about the surface web. Surface web is what's at the very top. That's the public internet, right? Facebook, social media, Google, Reddit, search engines, all that stuff. That goes on the surface web, news sites, and that's what you're used to seeing. Now the deep web, that's where you get into more private networks, right? Medical, financial, legal networks, education networks, all deep web. Privatized records, private networks, much more secure. Whatever. What we're concerned with is the dark web. Dark web is a bad place. That's at the very bottom of the internet, underneath the iceberg in the darkest part, and that's where you get to see some real nasty stuff. Now, you don't need to take my definition or my word for what the dark web is. Let's look at what Wikipedia says about the dark web. Wikipedia defines the dark web as the invisible, hidden part of the World Wide Web commonly used for the buying and selling of recreational drugs for totalitarian societies such as ISIS to communicate with the outside world, operating organized crime syndicates, human trafficking, corporate espionage, identity theft, illegal trade, and media exchange for pedophiles and terrorists. Is that where you want your company information to go? Absolutely not. I don't think so. So, neither did the DoD want their CUI to end up there either. So, they adopted some standards, and they started with NIST. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it's a set of rules that the DoD adopted to protect the CUI that they were handing out to contractors. And enforcement began, let me back up a little bit. They made the announcement in 2015, but the enforcement really began at the end of 2017 of this NIST SP 800-171 standard. And after this date, right, primes were expected to provide their contracting officer with a self-certified compliance set of documents, right? The first one was a POAM, P-O-A-N-M. That's a plan of action and milestones. That's a document that indicates the deficiencies of meeting these controls for SP 800-171. That's 110 controls there. And it also includes when they're going to have them remediated, right? So if they are deficient in, let's say, two-factor authentication, how long is it going to take for them to put in? 6 months? Great. Put it in the POAM. Second thing is an SSP. The SSP gives more details on how you're going to get there, right? Or if you already have some controls that you do meet, it indicates how you meet them. All good, right? Well, the way that you're going to come up with this kind of, POAM and SSP yourself is through a standardized roadmap. And this is great. You can use this for any sort of compliance requirement that you might have. So, first thing you got to start with is a gap assessment, right? Gap assessment doesn't stand for anything. It's just gaps, right? Holes, pukas, right? You're going to identify the gaps between what the compliance requirements desire and where you are in your organization. Second thing you're going to put together is after you've identified those gaps, you put together a written plan. And that written plan is what's going to bring you to compliance. Right? And that compliance, right, is in the form of your POAM and your SSP. Next thing you do is you put together your submissions, right? So this goes to your contracting officer, it goes into SPRS, it goes into your CMMC file, and it can go to a third party if it's your CO. But the key is you've created your documentation, then you take your submissions and you got to give it to somebody or file it. And then last comes the most fun part of all, which is actually doing the work. You got to implement these practices and controls that you promised you're going to do. Then you got to go back and review it, right? And that review process is when you start all over again. Create another gap assessment. Identify the gaps. Find out where you need to be, where you're deficient. Create that written plan, update it. Submit your to your CO all these updated your updated plans, your updated paperwork, or file it internally. and then you're going to actually have to do the work and then go over and over again. And you're probably wondering, how often do I need to do this? And the answer is at least once per year. Now, I'm going to kind of show you what a gap assessment looks like, because you're probably wondering, what is this whole gap assessment thing he keeps talking about, right? Now, internally, we created our own system because, quite frankly, it got kind of hard to do this by hand every single time. So let's log in over here. Let's see, we have a demo account. All right. And this system we developed in-house, it's called Riscara. It's pretty cool. And we can look at an assessment. And let's look at an assessment. Let's see, our first one here from December of last year, right? So this gap assessment looks at the first control for 801.71, limiting access control to authorized users. We have an SSP guidance, right? So this is the stuff that's going to go inside of our system security plan. Pretty much asking if we give them access to resources such as files, emails, internet, blah, 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 to only authorized users. We put this in here inside of our SSP guidance. And we go on and we mark each of these as pass, fail, pass, fail, pass, fail, right? You go through these 110 controls, and it takes a bit of time, but you only have to do it once, and then from there on out, you just create copies, right? And so we can look at this later and see that, oh, we did this again in April, and the idea is that you improve over that period of time, and hopefully that's enough time for you to show significant improvements so you can update your POAM and SSP so that you don't have to fall behind or risk losing your status as a contractor. Okay, so that's a kind of a gaps assessment. Looks like you go through each piece one at a time and make sure that you meet all of these controls that are required by 801.71. So you're probably wondering, with such a great system in place, with having everyone, look through these 110 controls, and it was very clear and able to understand all the lingo and language that's in them, what could go wrong, right? What do you think happened? Well, unfortunately, IT departments and contractors, they kept pushing the dates back on those POAMs, right? Remember I mentioned earlier that example about two-factor authentication, right? Well, let's say you're going to get that two-factor authentication done by June, right? But, June comes and goes, and update your paperwork and say, we're going to do that by December. And then December comes and goes, and you say, we're going to get to that next April. And then you keep pushing that out. Well, unfortunately, they did not like that. And so in January of 2019, they sent out a pretty upset letter saying that they did not like what was happening. They did not like this lack of accountability. And so they began fining folks in about, late 2019. And they said that they needed to put in a more official way to certify that an organization was meeting these requirements. And then that's where CMMC was born. That's where it came from. So, few bad apples ruining it for everyone, right? So the official CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, has a key word in there, and that word is certification, right? That means that a third party is going to come in and certify that you did what you said you were going to do. Do you think that a contracting officer can read and interpret stacks of POAMs and SSPs? I know personally, because we've given it to contracting officers and they said, wow, this is great, and they just put it right over here next to their other pile of paperwork that they need to do. It's very technical, not something that they have the expertise to be able to understand, but they can sure read a single piece of paper that says certified, right? Much simpler. So that third-party auditor, that's the one who comes in, they certify your company, and that third-party auditor is called a 3PAO. That's a third-party assessment organization. We are an RPO, registered practitioner. RP means that we can come in and assist you to get everything ready to the point when the auditor walks in and says, oh, show me what you got. Look at everything, right? Everything's laid out, nice and neat. They can put their stamp of approval, goes to the accreditation board. Accreditation board comes back and says, yeah, everything looks great. Give you a stamp of approval. You have your certification. That's kind of how we work together, right? And then that certification is what you turn in with your bid. And your bid is going to tell you what level of certification you need. I'm sure you've heard kind of some, 1 through 5, level 1, level 5, or level 3. What should it be? I'll show you what it looks like. Now, I don't like this graphic very much. I'm going to show you this one. This one's a lot nicer. Think of these levels of CMMC like Lego bricks, right? Level 1 has 17 practices. I guess every industry likes to have their nomenclature, and in this particular instance, NIST 800-171 had 110 controls. They decided in CMMC to call them something different. They wanted to call them practices, so they're called practices. Level 1 CMMC certification has 17 practices you need to meet. If you want to be SBA 8A certified, you now need to pass Level 1 certification. Now, don't tackle Level 2 until you got your Level 1 ducks all in a row, right? Because Level 2 adds an additional 55 practices on top of that, like Lego bricks. And Level 3, which is going to be considered the industry standard, adds another 58 on top of that for a total of 130 practices. Now remember I mentioned earlier, 800-171 has 110 controls. CMMC Level 3 has 130 practices. See what I'm saying? It's actually more work to become Level 3 certified, but it can be done. And I recommend tackling this one level at a time, rather than trying to go straight for Level 3 and getting frustrated and overwhelmed by all the things that need to be done, right? Now, CMMC came and went. They claimed that it was Revision 1 would be released in January of 2020, but they kind of released it kind of at the end of 2020 and at the end of January. And the current version, the one that's actually posted to their website, came out in March. It's called, and it's version 1.02. The original CMMC timeline indicated that even though they released it in January 2020, by June of 2020, it would become a requirement on RFPs and RFIs, and by September of 2020, everyone needs to be certified. No questions asked, no exceptions, and of course that failed, right? And I don't think it was due to COVID. It was just a very optimistic timeline in terms of how difficult it was to actually implement these processes and organizations. Now, the new timeline means that everything is going to be, sent out through a phased approach between now and September 30th of 2025. So that gives you about 4 years to get everything together, and not everyone is going to come up in their place in line right away. It's going to come in over time. Certifications are going to be valid for 3 years, so you can kind of see how, if we have 4 years until everyone until it's required for everyone, and you only got a three-year certification, that's good. That means you're going to have to do some refresh between now and 2025. On their website, these are the targets. 2021, they want 15 certified organizations. 2022, 75, and each year more and more certifications, right? And this all sounds great, and if it's not your turn in line, then you have nothing to worry about, right? There's no possible thing that they could, no possible wrench that they could throw in between, this deadline of 2025 and 800-171 stuff, right? You're off the hook for the next few years, right? Wrong. There's something called SPRS, and this is the new surprising thing that was thrown into the works late last year. Notices started going out around September, and what it mentioned was that you need to take your 800-171 progress, your gap assessments that you've been doing, and you need to score them in something that we call SPRS. Now, I'm going to show you what that scoring looks like. This document, of course, is available. This is the 800-171 DoD Assessment Scoring Template Methodology PDF document, right? And it's very strict. It says that for each of these 110 controls, you can get a total score of 110, and then for everything that you don't meet, you subtract whatever's in this column, right? So pass, fail, you remove those scores. The only problem is with this little system is that you can easily attain a negative score. So that makes you look bad. When you do submit your score to SPRS, it is considered a low confidence score, and that means it's self-assessed. It just says, hey, what's your score? Enter the number, and you enter the number. Done, right? But you also have to put in the date and version of your SSP, of your POAM, right? And of course, if you have a low score, it makes you look bad. So you want to have something a little bit positive. I recommend anywhere from 40 to 60 positive, not negative 40, not negative 60. You want a self-assessed score of at least 40 to 60. Of course, maximum score is 110. If you were in high school, a 40 to 60 would still be considered a failing grade, but let's just be nice here. So, I'm going to show you on our website how to access the here we go, Cylanda.com. Go to our Cylanda.com website, go over here to our blog, and scroll down a bit, and you're going to see over here, let's see, a DFARS update. This is a quick guide to how to get your score in SPRS, why it was made, where it's what's the whole idea behind all this scoring methodology and CMMC and NIST, and now's the time to prepare, and it gives you some resources on how to do this. Recommend checking that out when you have a chance. Of course, the URL is cylanda.com/dfars-updates-a-quick-guide, and a link is going to be available on our download page at the very end of this presentation. So, I suspect I know what you're thinking. Oh no. But, these are really best practices. That means that you don't want to become another Colonial Pipeline incident or a Florida water treatment plant incident, do you? Right? Or even the kind of incidents that we have to deal with. So these are all best practices. These are, driving on the right side of the road, buckling your seatbelt, don't tailgate, right? They're just really enforcing these best practices that you should be having in your company anyway, right? You don't want to be a victim. So let's not do that. So let's talk about common requirements for any of these compliance standards, 80171, CMMC, SOC 2, etc. One of the main things we see is documentation. You got to have documentation of your employees, right? Individual responsibilities, what they do, your technology, what it does, assets, scope of access. You should have an asset inventory anyway for depreciation purposes, but you should also lay out what those assets do. What should they be doing? You should have procedural documentations. So, what happens when a staff changes, when someone leaves your company or changes positions? How about your technology? Backups, right? Disaster recovery. How does that all work? These are things that should all be documented. And if they're not, well, now's a good time to start. So, next place to look at is Employee Security Awareness Training Program. Now, this graphic that you see here comes from the Security Awareness Training Program that we use. And what's great about it is that it shows evidence of progress, right? You want to have a structured approach. I talk to IT departments sometimes, and they say, yeah, we got a cybersecurity awareness training program in place. Once per year, during lunchtime, I show up and I tell the guys, don't do this. Well, from personal experience, I can tell you right now, it's really hard to compete with lunch. When there's food on the table in front of you, all bets are off, right? So having a structured kind of a micro training approach where maybe each week there's just a little bit of training that goes on, and your staff can try little things that are fun exercises and make it more of an engaging, fun experience. That works a lot better than trying to have massive training programs where everyone's involved and overwhelming the staff with a lot of information and scary material, right? One thing I will warn you about if you are in IT is it is difficult to get your employees to get into the whole buy-in process, but it starts from the top down, and I highly recommend it. In fact, let's call it mandatory, because it sure is going to be needed with NIST or CMMC if either of these requirements apply to you. Some of the type of common requirements that we see is web content filtering. This is great. There are a number of engines and tools that can do this, but what they do is they can track employee web activity, and you get kind of a picture of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and if they're doing anything negative, it stops them, right? And typically there's different groups of folks that have different levels of access. So for instance, marketing may have access to social media, but operations may not, that kind of stuff, right? And of course, the primary attack vector in organizations is email, right? So spear phishing, regular phishing, all these attacks that come in that are meant to get you to click, right? It can stop that kind of unintentional, accidental click activity, and it makes it really easy to see if you have a repeat offender or someone who needs a little bit extra training to be able to identify these emails in the first place. We're going to talk also next about another technology safeguard, EDR versus antivirus. This is really important because antivirus is being phased out. Antivirus, it's a reactive approach to protecting an organization, right? You have to have a malicious payload show up and sit there on your computer and try to do something, and have this antiquated definition library-based engine scan this executable or this item in your memory and try to stop it from doing whatever it's doing. Well, EDR isn't like that. EDR is proactive, and EDR stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. That's a proactive approach. So it's going to detect any sort of scripting activity, any sort of things that can end up inside of your supply chain. So for instance, we've had EDR detect infections in software that a customer is already using that's legitimate, that's used for their business. So I'll tell you how that works. The software maker bought a component that makes PDFs. And then the moment that software program launched, it was insecure, right? So somehow the computers that had created that PDF component had a malicious payload, and it ended up translating over to the customer. Now, we see this as a major problem, particularly in video game companies, because the video game companies, those computers, those developers that are making the video games, their computers get infected, and then it goes out to hundreds of thousands of computers and PlayStation devices and all kinds of Android devices all around the world, and it's really hard to stop at that point. So it's an excellent distribution method if you're a bad actor, but an EDR is going to kind of stop that kind of stuff in its tracks, because it's going to detect that kind of activity where it starts to do lateral movement across your network, where scripts are trying to create footholds within the network. These kind of activities get stopped right there with an EDR. Antivirus can't do that. And this is an arms race. Let's be honest about this. These guys are smart, they're well-funded, and they typically have some pretty deep pockets, and they want to do you harm, and they have the resources to do it. This is an arms race. You have to kind of up your game each year, because certainly the bad actors are doing this themselves. So let's talk about some more technology requirements. There's something called a UTM. You may have heard this name popped around a little bit. A UTM is short for Unified Threat Management. And you may have heard of firewalls, right? Well, firewall makers are now kind of distancing themselves from the name firewall, and they want to go with UTM because it uses AI and a lot of fancy software and machine learning to stop any sort of unusual activity and problems that can occur on both sides of the network, the WAN side and the LAN side, right? And they typically have things like IDSs, so intrusion detection systems. Those are tripwires to stop any sort of bad actors from being able to establish footholds within your network. They'll do packet inspection in real time, so that'll sometimes do web traffic filtering, but it'll also stop viruses from coming through. It'll do threat blocking and bad websites and all these kind of things. It does a lot of checking at the gateway level, and that's great if you have a lot of mobile devices or other devices on the network that may not be applicable for some sort of other software-based protection. So it's a great addition to the network, and typically this is required for NIST and CMMC. It also does traffic shaping, which is needed if you're using voice traffic and video traffic over the same internet connection. You don't want it to be bogged down just because folks are listening to streaming audio, right? And if you have remote workers or remote sites, VPNs allow you to connect the sites together, make them transparent. With CMMC, you do require FIPS level encryption, so not all UTMs meet this requirement, so you might want to check with your vendor. You may need to do some sort of hardware swaps to meet this requirement there for yourself. Last thing here we're going to talk about is SIM. Now, SIM, as I've pronounced it, is a little bit different than what you see on your screen there, right? SIEM, S-I-E-M, is Security, Information, and Event Management. Whoa, sounds complicated. And we also have SOC on there too. What does SOC mean? It's not a punch, it's the Security Operations Center. That means it's a live crew that's actually watching things, right? So let's talk about what SIM and SOC means, right? So all your devices on your network, right? UTMs, workstations, servers, they'll have logs of stuff going on. And, well, if we have someplace that it can go, then we can have a live SOC team analyze those logs for anything unusual. Now, a SIM plus SOC combination is really good, and I'll tell you why. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink my little screen there. Perfect. Now, the SIM device takes all these logs, sticks them all together, uses AI, machine learning, to figure out if something is important. Right? Now, if something is important, well, it can take that and send it over to the SOC team. The SOC team can look at it and say, this is an evidence of compromise. This could be a real problem in the network. We need to notify the customer. At which point they'll notify us, and then we'll look at it for a false positive. And if it truly is something that is an issue, we can stop it in its tracks. Now, SIMs and SOCs are wonderful tools to put in after there has been a security incident in your network, because we can see if there's any additional footholds in place, and we can see if anything unusual is happening. It's kind of like a good God's eye view of what's going on inside of your network from the very, very fundamental level. And it solves a lot of the, or should I say, it meets a lot of the requirements that are inside of your CMMC and your NIST requirement handbook. So be aware of that, because implementing a SIM and SOC solution can knock a bunch of points right up and make you a lot more, lot more likely to pass your audit. Now, let's talk about your industry, right? Your industry is in the building industry. And you're probably wondering, well, it's all great. We've talked about critical infrastructure, and we've talked about, all these other places that, financial services, etc. Maybe they're the big targets. We're not a target, are we? Well, unfortunately, you'd be wrong. And, you don't have to take my word for it. These are also going to be inside of your downloaded section. You can see here under the DOJ, they've issued something. This is TLP green, so that is related to your industry. Business email compromise scheme targets construction contractors and their clients for financial gain. Yikes, right? There's also another FBI pin over here. This one's TLP white. Cyber actors leverage subscription-based commercial databases to conduct business, email compromise fraud against construction companies. And this goes on and on. There's a lot of this stuff out there. And so you should know that the construction industry is a target, and you need to do something about this. Otherwise, you risk becoming a victim, and we don't want that for you. So I'm going to talk about some of these resources, because I want to make sure that you have access to them. So you can go to Cylanda.com, and then you click the drop down under resources, and you'll see ACECH. The password to access that site is resilient. You're going to find a copy of this presentation. You're going to find links to all these resources that I mentioned during the presentation, as well as downloadable TLP green and white resources. The only thing I ask is that for the TLP green resources, only share that with others in your industry. And I want to make sure that you understand what other free resources we're giving out there. We have this thing called a phishing risk assessment. This is really cool. We can send out a phishing test for up to 100 of your employees in one shot, and within 24 hours, we'll be able to show you who's clicking on what. Now, let's be clear here. Your employees are being phished whether you like it or not today. Wouldn't you like to just know if they're actually falling for it, right? So free phishing risk assessment. It's a wonderful tool. Highly advise you guys use it. We can also do a free dark web company search, where we'll look on the dark web to see if anything of your company has ended up out there, because if it has, it's better to know so that way you can do something about it. We'll do a network documentation template. One of the things that we find with IT departments is, unfortunately, sometimes the network documentation is a little bit out of date or lacking, or just not that easy to read. They want to refresh. And it is a requirement for your CMMC, for your SSP. You're going to need that network documentation up to date so that you can use it. So we have a template that can help you get started right away. We can also give you a Office 365 if you have that service. Our SOC team can monitor your account for any unusual activity. So that means that all employees, if any suspicious email forwarding rules show up, any out-of-country logins start occurring, right? Or if any security incidents do occur on your Office 365 account, because unfortunately, when Microsoft hands over Office 365 to the to the public for them to use it, that being you and me, right? There's all these security holes that it just leaves wide open. I don't understand it, but unfortunately, bad actors do take advantage of those security loopholes. They can get inside your network, and you might not even know that they're inside your email and doing bad things. So we definitely want to, get some visibility into that and stop them, right? And we also have a free trial of Total Security. Total Security is our our golden product. That's the one where we can take care of all your patches and management and security and all that back-end stuff that the IT department may not be able to get to or has a hard time, actually keeping up with. And that Total Security product is what will kind of take you to the next level and allow you to really sleep at night, because you'll know that you have, the complete security package that we offer that is there to protect all of our very valued clients in our community. So, give you a free trial of that. Happy to do so. Some more links are on this, on the slide over here. You can download this on the PDF. Look for yourself. This is where you can see some of these CMMC requirements. And that brings us to the end of the presentation, where we went through the Q&A. Now, one of the Q&A questions, which was phenomenal, was about SPRS. They said, "Oh my, how do we calculate our SPRS score? Because we're now being required to submit it. Otherwise, we can't bid and we can't get paid." Both circumstances we've seen. So let me show you how SPRS works, right? So you can go back over here to our blog, right? And our blog entry is going to have, the SPRS system. Now, Supplier Risk Management System, right? And there we go. Bring this up over here. So this is this is the defense, right? So this is the assessment methodology PDF. So we're going to click on this, and you're going to scroll down, right, all the way down here to the bottom, and you're going to have your SPRS scores, and you're going to have to create a gap assessment and figure out how to bring your score up. Now, here's what I recommend. Now, we had to do this by hand, and it got really old really quick. So in Riscara here, we can take a look at an SPRS score. All right, so let's look at the latest one from April. We're going to check out the SPRS score, and we'll see that the SPRS score here as well, it's 15, it's a little bit low. But let's look at what each of these ones, right, match up to this PDF. And we'll see that, we've passed this one, but we failed this one over here. Now notice on this column, right, there's a value. Same here, value. If you want to bring up your SPRS score, are you going to focus on these ones, or are you going to focus on the 3s and the 5s? Focus on the 3s and 5s, right? That's how you're going to bring your value up the highest. All right, so let's look at these fails, right? We got ones. Let's see what else we have. We have maybe some more ones here. Let's find a 5. Here we go. Define, document, improve. Right, so let's see if we can take this fail and turn this into a pass, right? Save it. Bang, right? Now, we can recalculate our SPRS score instantly. Hey, we moved it up to a 20. Not too bad, right? What else can we bring up? All right, let's look at some of these more of these fails, right? We got a fail that's a 5, right? So this has to do with least privilege, right? Okay, we've implemented least privilege. We have it in our SSP. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to save it. Bang. Refresh again. Hey, our score is now 25. Not too bad. And keep on bringing those up. That's how you bring up your SPRS score, so that you can finally, give it into submission and get that contract, get that money flowing, right? So that's how SPRS works. That's how you can bring up your score. This is how we do it. I hope it's not too painful to do it by hand, but it can be done. We just like to calculate this stuff in real time and help our customers get their SPRS score ASAP, because I understand how so many people are waiting to get paid. Anyways, I hope this presentation has been informative. We try to rush through it so that it'd be the most value to you and your time. I thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys supporting our vision of creating local jobs and to be of service to you and the community. I'm Attila from Silanda. Feel free to reach out if you think that we can be of service. Stay safe out there.